let's begin. The topic of our report is about the study of the phenomenon of Western alchemy in the context of present-day social and cultural trends. Over the centuries, the phenomenon of Western alchemy invariably drew the attention of researchers, becoming an object of study of a variety of approaches and methods. Thus, it is natural to have a wide range of views on its essence, axiological and epistemological significance, social and cultural genesis, scenes and manifestations, ontological conditionality and epistemological orientation, the fact and the way of its existence.
Sorry, your presentation is disappeared. No.
Yes. Now. No, let's try again. Okay, here is the presentation. A characteristic feature of the genesis of alchemy as a social cultural phenomenon is the permanency of complex transformations as a result of its highly adaptive nature. In the 17th, 18th centuries, after reaching the peak of social, spiritual, and scientific development, alchemy underwent devastating social-cultural discrediting and scientific criticism and seemed to disappear, losing public support and recognition. However, alchemy soon demonstrated its viability, getting reborn from the ashes. Then, a 20th century worldview crisis questioned the ideals of the rationalist development way chosen by European civilization, brought new relevance to the ideas of Plato's cave and anamnesis, recollection of knowledge. Epistemologically, these moments directed the search for a worldview alternative into the realm of the irrational and esoteric. By the 19th, 20th centuries, there were some transformations of research discourse about science and alchemy. Firstly, the fundamental opposition, alchemy versus chemistry, was removed because the social status of natural science no longer required self-affirmation and by means of such negation of alchemy as something pseudoscientific or non-progressive form of knowledge, so-called enlightenment approach. Now this view was reviewed. Secondly, in the scientific community, the perception of alchemy had mostly acquired positive connotations due to the comparison and correlation of alchemical and chemical achievements. Alchemy started to be considered as a stage of development of chemistry, of natural science, etc. Third, as natural science has rejected the intransigence of straightforward materialism, it became clear that not only creating the material and technical base, but also at least some basic worldview ideas and research concepts should be included into the civilizational assets of alchemy. Thus, paradoxically, the difference between chemistry and alchemy seems to be gradually reduced to an axiological issue of goal setting. While the first aims at things achievable today, the second is aimed at things currently impossible, but that hypothetically may become real soon or in the long run. From such a point of view, alchemy acquires the status of a certain creative promoter of chemistry and also a full-fledged object of study from an academic standpoint. The illustration is about one curious episode, historical episode that became a legend, an inspiration of Friedrich Kekuler, who discovered the formula, the structural formula of benzene, or benzol, as we say. It was inspired by the image, very ancient archetypal image of Ouroboros, alchemical image seen by him while he slept. Very interesting case. So a classical view of historians of science to alchemy was formulated in the 19th century and prevailed in the beginning of the 20th century. So the alchemy was considered as the same chemistry at some historical stage of development. According to Justus von Liebig, alchemy has never been different from chemistry. And Robert Mont, one of the founders of the Ambix journal, wrote that alchemy is the story of man's observation and reflection of the nature and cause of what we know as chemistry now. So this is a classical, natural, scientific view on chemistry, but it is not the only view, as we know. One of the first methodological strategies, methodological approach and way of considering alchemy was a historical and chronological one, where the history of alchemy and its material was divided into some conditional periods by chronology and geography. So the first period of this timeline of the history of Western alchemy is, of course, the Hellenistic alchemy, originating in Hellenistic Egypt, connected with the synthesis of Greek natural philosophy and Egyptian religion and rituals and practice of craftsmen and so on. So the remarkable philosophical synthesis of Egyptian cultural tradition, its inherent practical and religious component with the classics of ancient philosophy, resulted in the formation of Hellenistic alchemy. The next, in the contrast to mystico-physical direction of Hellenism, the next period of the Genesis, Arabic alchemy was characterized by the primacy of practical and operational activity over abstract and speculative constructs. However, the prevalent historical views at this stage as a predominantly rationalistic seem biased. In general, a characteristic feature of the period is ambivalence, where proto-scientific intentions were complemented with a mystical and esoteric orientation of the doctrine. The next, the development of alchemy in Europe in the High Middle Ages became known as the era of Christian doctors. It is connected with the philosophers, scholasticists, and theologians known under such nicknames: Dr. Universalis, Albert the Great, Dr. Angelicus, Thomas Aquinas, Dr. Mirabilis, Roger Bacon, Dr. Illuminatus, Raymond Lully, and so on. One should notice that some of these authors, or even every one of these authors, could be a pseudo Albert, pseudo Thomas, pseudo Robert, Roger, and pseudo Raymond Lully in these alchemical treatises, because many texts were attributed to some philosophers of ancient times, or some authorities, some great renowned philosophers of the Middle Ages, but it is often could be pseudepigraphs, especially that is about Raymond Lully and Thomas Aquinas, where we have some treatises, but obviously these are not their treatises, but it is pseudo Thomas and pseudo Raymond. Well, the mystical occult component of the phenomenon did not lose its significance, but the rational spirit of scholasticism led to the changes in understanding human creative potential. And theological scholastic speculation assimilated the guidelines and achievements of empirical knowledge. The next period, late medieval and early modern alchemy, its characteristic features are the Paracelsian Paracelsian revolution in alchemy, and the so-called Rosicrucian Enlightenment, described by Francis Yates. This stage of the phenomenon history is characterized by a pronounced dichotomy of genesis. Significant progress in science-related operational alchemy was observed on the background of the rise of spiritual alchemy with its primacy of mystical abstractions and allegories. The next period, the modern age, is often considered as the age of the decline of alchemy, or even complete disappearance, the end of alchemy, but the situation is much more complicated. here we have a new stage of the development. We can call this stage neo-alchemy, with its different approaches and directions related as to traditional alchemy, as well as to quasi-scientific approaches. For example, the hyperchemistry and efforts to synthesis of traditional alchemical concepts with the discoveries of the modern science. For example, modern chemistry, nuclear reactions, physics, etc., etc. Then next we can see here some works of this period of neo-alchemy. For example, Ziliani and Falconelli, some episodes were more anecdotic and scandalous. For example, the history of Zbigniew Dunikovsky and his discovery of so-called Z rays, by means of which he tried to make gold from the sand. The next topic to be considered are some approaches to studying alchemy. This scheme, this system is not the only one and not the only possible classification of approach. We will concentrate more on approaches of studying alchemy in the academic discourse. Firstly, the historical approach is based mainly on the study of and critical analysis of primary sources, the authorization and chronology. The historiographical approach deals with the works of researchers. It has some pluses and minuses, because we deal with the subjectivity and the author's view is subjective. And the next one is archaeological approach. The object of study is a sample of material culture. The chemical approach considers alchemy from the standpoint of chemical science and provide a possibility for reconstructions and modeling of alchemical realities, alchemical processes, and technologies. The psychological approach is well known. It was founded by Carl Gustav Jung and his followers. The systematic study of allegories and symbols. The cultural studies approach is one of the most complex and complicated, means the study and integrated assessment of alchemy as a cultural phenomenon in a very broad sense. And we can connect it also with study of alchemy in the religious studies, in alchemy in art, alchemy in modern culture, etc. These approaches are interrelated, and we can present it in such form. And now I see we have not so much time, so let's go forward. The full text will be in the proceedings, and then we can consider alchemy and its way of existence and its images in culture with uses of the category of modus, a way of existence, a certain type and nature of being of the phenomenon. Firstly, the historical modus of alchemy includes manifestations of existence which are provided with valid historical evidence. And the second is the legendary modus of alchemy, where the very fact of creating a legend seems to be fundamental. And these legends are perceived as somewhat equivalent or even more convincing than real facts. And so these legends are also the facts of human culture. And they have their influence in modern day society. Between the historical and legendary modi of alchemy, there are adventurous and mythological and sorcerous manifestations of this phenomenon. These modi are also interrelated, and we can present them in such way. In the legendary modus of alchemy, we have such a trend that the old legends are being materialized and live their own lives in contemporary culture. Also attempts to create the modern day alchemical legends are not uncommon. For example, the legend of Golden Streets in Prague, as also known as the Alchemist Street, or legends about alchemical laboratories often used by pharmacies or pharmacy museums. For example, in Ukraine, we have pharmacy museums in Lviv and Kyiv, and they use alchemical legends about laboratories, etc., and so on. For example, in Kyiv Pharmacy Museum, we have such exposition of the alchemist laboratory, reconstructed in our time. Also, the fantastic and legendary dimension of alchemy is traditionally reflected in fiction, which can be seen as an evidence of the continued existence of the phenomenon in its legendary modus in the modern world. Some manifestations are very popular and well known. For example, the idea of alchemy as a sorcery, as a black magic, as some forbidden, dangerous, and satanic. The typical person of such kind of alchemy and its image is Dr. Faust, and another another versions of this character. The adventurous manifestations are connected with the idea of counterfeiting money, of fraud, of something something criminal. And here we have an image of alchemists as a trickster, as a this approach, this view on alchemy is also popular in fiction, and it was so even in the Middle Ages. We have such an image of alchemists at Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, and Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, especially the canon's Yeoman's Tale about alchemists. The figure of an alchemist, a magician, sorcerer, etc., belongs to the established and apparently archetypal images of human consciousness. Also, one should notice the existence of the extraordinary public interest in the Middle Ages and their heritage, an integral part of which is the phenomenon of alchemy. Often it happens in literature in the genres of fantasy, but we have a medieval or pseudo-medieval entourage in these texts, in these films, computer games, and so on. So let's conclude our report. The methodology of alchemy research in the diachronic dimension has become widespread and scientifically recognized. Within the scientific discourse, some methodologically different approach to the study of the phenomenon have been identified. The complex involvement of the cognitive potential of these approaches provides opportunities for the recreation of an integrated picture of the phenomenon of alchemy, which is not reduced to the sum of methodologically differentiated projections. The next. The analysis of the state of representation of the alchemical heritage testifies to the existence of the public interest in the phenomenon, which is not so much in the historical chemical aspect, but in the incomparably wider realm of essences and manifestations of socio-cultural life of alchemy. The unification of these manifestations is possible using the category of modus. The fundamental boundaries of the socio-cultural existence of the phenomenon are determined by its historical and legendary modi. The next, the relativity of the existence of ultimate modi provides the integrity of the phenomenon and determines the emergence of numerous derivative forms. And this formulation of the problem brings relevance to the vision of Western alchemy as a phenomenon, the existence of which is not the existence of which goes beyond the Middle Ages and reaches the present day. That's all. Thank you for your attention.